Hi, welcome to another talk time. I'm Meredith McCarthy. I'm a clinical hypnotherapist here in Wellington, New Zealand. Every week we do these talk times and we're talking about different topics, everything to do with hypnosis. And I'm passionate about sharing what I know. On this edition of Talk Time, we're going to be talking about cognitive psychology and how your mind might be sabotaging you and how we work with clients. Teresa Saunders is a fellow colleague of mine. She's also based in Wellington, New Zealand, and she's going to be joining me today. So I hope you enjoy this edition.
Hi Meredith, hi everybody. Nice to be with you again on this sunny day in Wellington.
It is beautiful. We've just gone into daylight saving, we've claimed back an hour for our sunlight in the evening. It's quite lovely, isn't it?
It is. Summer feels like it's around the corner.
When we're looking at diving into today's topic, we've got a couple of key things that I want to share with you about one, what is sort of happening on a cognitive level to the mind, and we're going to go through some understandings there and also how a hypnotherapist works with this. So let's dive into some slides. When we're kind of looking at that idea of self-sabotage, this is something that a lot of us are familiar with, where the mind is working against our conscious goals. Now, most people that come in for a session are looking for help with motivation to break through a block, and they often sort of describe it that way. So when we're looking at working with clients, we need to look at what are they doing that might be self-sabotaging action and sort of explore, is there a reason, is there secondary gain, what might be going on there. What are your thoughts on that one, Teresa?
Definitely. I think this is a really interesting topic, to be honest. I mean, we as hypnotherapists often want to dive deep in to find out what that root cause is. And I think we need to be a bit mindful sometimes and careful on missing perhaps something, because, we might dig deeper and think it's something deeper because somebody's not sleeping and their anxiety, but that person is actually drinking a ton of caffeine or caffeinated drinks. And that's what's actually stopping them from sleeping and making their anxiety more, not necessarily the cause. So I do think we have to bear that in mind as well.
Most definitely. So, be curious with your clients, think about how that is, and really look at what are some things that's going on for that client maybe in their past. So when we're kind of looking at that idea, it often manifests as procrastination, self-doubt, and negative self-talk. So we're looking at that, and the client's going to tell you a lot of what's been going on for them. So be curious, hold that space, because that's going to help you lean into the direction that you may need to go with them in a session. When we're looking at the idea of cognitive distortions, when we're looking at the idea of cognitive distortions, they're patterns of thought that can distort reality and lead to negative emotions. And many people, it's mind-made. We're making up stories of belief in our mind. And that's something that as hypnotherapists, we're really good at dealing with. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, with self-sabotaging, we often ruminate on those negative thoughts. And, they manifest, they go bigger and bigger the more that we think about it.
So when we think about the saying, where attention goes, energy flows, it's so true. So if we want to reverse that pattern for our clients, we need to really key in, what do they want instead, rather than focus too much on what they don't want. This is a wonderful and perfect opportunity to explore. So what do they want? What's the opposite of that? So when we're kind of looking at that idea of bringing it all together, just to recap, so self-sabotage is when our unconscious mind works against our conscious goals, and it often manifests as procrastination, self-doubt, or negative self-talk, and the cognitive distortions are patterns of thought that distort reality, leading to negative emotions. So when you go, yeah.
So I'm not sure whether this leads into the next slide or not. What I was going to say is often people get confused, emotions and feelings, the difference between the two of them. Do you want to explain to those listening, Meredith, what the difference is between an emotion and a feeling, and how that is perceived in our body or mind?
Well, when we're kind of sensing something on a feeling level, quite often it's not even conscious. So it's like a reaction to something which is very raw and real. So we might start to behave a certain way because we're getting the sense or feeling, but we may not actually be emotionally aware that that's what's going on. If we look at someone says, how do you feel about that? We might even have to think, oh, how do I feel about that? It's not in the forefront of our mind. So often the emotions that are going on for us are very real and raw, but maybe they're not conscious. We're not connected to them yet. We haven't given them a meaning or an understanding. So, yeah, what are your thoughts on that one, Teresa?
Yeah, and I sort of think that, sometimes when somebody has a thought, I like to explore what emotions are attached to that thought. If it's like a negative one, and trying to unpack and explore to see where your client's mind is going into that behavior, to see if you can see the reasonings behind that behavior.
And many people, they have no idea why they're doing it. It's such a deep autopilot that's in them, but they can't actually determine why. They just know they're doing it. Now, if we think about people on screens, they're addicted to their device all the time. It's an accidental addiction cycle that they might have found themselves in. So they may not be aware of how addicted they are until they go without it. So suddenly their phone breaks, and then they're sort of checking, oh, hang on, no, I don't have my phone. And it's like this response. And so all of these programs are running, and quite often, again, beyond consciousness. So when we're looking at delving in and finding out more what's really going on here, this is a big part of it. When we're thinking about what is cognitive psychology, the study of mental processes like thinking, memory, perception, and problem solving. So that's something to think about when we're dealing with our clients, how we're going to deal with those elements. The cognitive distortions and negative thought patterns that can lead to self-sabotage. A lot of people, though, some people don't have internal dialogue. So it might surprise some of you out there. So if you're thinking, oh, so what goes through your mind when you go about that? I don't know. Some people really don't have internal dialogue. So be aware. It's not because they're being difficult. They might not actually be processing the world in the same way you do. Same thing as what do you have in your mind's eye? What vision of success? And again, some people are not going to be able to articulate what they're seeing in their mind's eye because they don't see anything. And you go, wow, okay, how on earth can that be true? So when we're looking at negative thought patterns, thoughts come in different ways for different people, and it may not necessarily be the way that you're processing your thoughts. So just be aware when we're dealing with clients that can happen. So drop in, find out, how is my client actually processing their story? What's going on here? What are your thoughts on that, Teresa?
Definitely, again, I think we've brought this up many times, is we're not the fixer. Our client is the fixer. Our client has the answers. So just because we would react in a certain way to that situation or challenge, your client may not do. So it's really important that we don't impose our beliefs and values onto the person that's come to see us for therapy.
Absolutely. So when we're looking at that idea of the study of mental processes like thinking, memory, perception, problem solving, thoughts and beliefs shape our emotions and behaviours, and cognitive distortions are negative thoughts, thought patterns that can lead to self-sabotage. So just being aware of how that is. So when we're thinking out thoughts and beliefs shape our emotions, quite often those are handed down off our family, where we're learning about many beliefs about the world because our family has told us stories. Now, some of those stories might be quite distorted, actually. Maybe it's a story around money, you know?
Yeah,
And
how many of us were taught money grows on trees or money doesn't grow on trees, and as a child we'd go around looking for trees with money on. Yeah.
So if we want to shape ourselves into new behaviours of belief, we need to kind of be aware, hey, what is behind this? It might not actually be owned by you. It might have been taken on board at some point because you've had an experience. But that doesn't mean that you don't sort of grow out of that. Absolutely. And this is why therapy is so valuable. It helps a person shake away those old ways of doing things and bring in new thoughts, new beliefs, and really reinforce them. When we're looking at that idea of the distortions in a therapy session, how would you deal with that if someone came in and you noticed that they were over grossly exaggerating something? What would you be listening out for?
Well, there's a couple of ways that you could look at that. I mean, you could actually be looking to seeing if they're actually running in fight, flight, freeze mode, and whether you need to activate the parasympathetic mode, your rest and digest. And one of the ways that you can do that is by actually getting them to imagine that they're eating or chewing gum or that sort of thing. And that's often a tactic that is used with some therapists to get people to choose gum, to take them into the rest and digest, because the saliva then activates the parasympathetic nervous system and we cannot be in both at the same time. So that's a good way to bring them out. And another way would be to explore the dialogue in that, and what if that that happens, so then what? And keep going like, and then what happens, and get them to tell you the story.
Many of my clients might come in and use the word never. I can never get my head around this, or I can never achieve this because, and they've got these huge beliefs about their ability to get through something. And quite often if you challenge that never and you say, never? What about, and you give them an example and go, oh, yeah, well, maybe not never. So it kind of gets them to be challenged about these gross exaggerations of a position of belief. So they stop being victim to it, because quite often that can create a real victim energy. So nothing goes my way. Nothing ever goes your way. Probably many things have gone their way, but they're focusing on the things that didn't go their way. And then they're adding that to their bigger reality.
That's right, ruminating again on those negative thoughts, which just then sometimes make it grow and grow, grossly exaggerated.
So when we're looking at some common cognitive distortions would be black and white thinking, seeing things in extremes. Can you think of any example that you would say would be black and white thinking?
Oh, now you put me on the spot. Again, right, I'm always late and never on time. Yeah.
When we're looking at getting that belief swinging in the opposite direction, obviously there are going to be some kinds of people who are very black and white generally in their way of thinking. There's one way or another. There's not an in-between way. So you may find that because they're in that negative thinking, to flip them is very, very dramatic. Whereas if someone's got levels of grey, like in between, Their dramatic shift may not be the same. So that can happen too, where you're going to see a person who's overly pessimistic become very, very optimistic if they flip. Whereas someone who isn't so much black and white thinking, sort of extremes, they might have a more moderate reaction to something.
Subtle changes can occur, yeah.
Absolutely. So when we're looking at this catastrophizing, so expecting the worst possible outcome, this is definitely something that people do a lot, and they come in because maybe it's a relationship. I hear that within relationships all the time, where they're catastrophizing and they're worrying about them cheating, like they've had someone cheat on them in the past, or not being a good parent. Maybe they're worrying about their own abilities and they're catastrophizing how they are as a parent, and they think, oh, I'm a bad parent, my child's going to be terrible, and it hasn't even happened yet. And actually, you know, the real example is there's many bad parents that have fantastic children. So regardless of your parenting, sometimes we need to get a client to really shift that perspective. What are your thoughts?
For sure. And also, we can sometimes be our own worst enemy. We really do criticize ourselves quite often with our negative talk and our inner dialect. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So when we're looking at that idea of overgeneralisation, this is another one, making broad conclusions from limited evidence. So according to whom is that true? This is a good sort of challenger question to ask a client. What are your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, when people come in and say, nobody likes me, I have no friends, you know, that's really a big broad statement. And what evidence do you actually have of that? But it is a common phrase that people will tend to use.
Definitely. So in a therapy space, we want to kind of go, is that really the truth, or is there something in between? Chances are high that the person is just feeling really wounded and they've exaggerated and overgeneralized their position. So it's good to kind of get a moment to inquire there. So mind reading is another one, big one. And that can happen often in workplaces. They go, oh, my manager doesn't like me. I'm like, okay, what tells you your manager doesn't like you? Oh, because, you know, they praise this other person. I said, well, okay, well, when we're thinking about praising the other person, let's look at the other person for a moment. How well are they doing in their work? Oh, they're okay. I guess they're average. And I'm like, well, what do you think you're doing? Well, I think I'm doing pretty good. And I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe the manager thinks the praise needs to go to the person who's maybe not doing so well. And perhaps because you're doing so well, you're actually not getting the praise, but that's because you don't need it. And then they go, oh, yeah, maybe. So it's like, okay, maybe there's another way of reading this, not just the way that you've been reading it. And what makes you think that? Has there been other times where people haven't praised you and it's not worked out well? So it could have been a past thing that they've gone through, a bit of trauma that's tainting the way they're experiencing their current experience in work. Maybe they've been through workplace bullying. Your thoughts on that, Teresa?
Yeah, it can also be like a lack of self-confidence in the person that's thinking that, because your manager might actually think that you're extremely capable, so therefore need to sort of support others by giving them the attention and the praise to try and build them up. But they think that you carry on, you do your work well, and you don't actually need that praise, but you're actually taking that another way. So I think it's really good sometimes to ask those questions and find out why somebody's thinking or assuming that someone's thinking negatively about themselves.
Yeah, for sure. This is, part of being a therapist, just looking at things. So just to recap on those, black and white thinking, seeing things to the extremes, catastrophizing, expecting the worst possible outcome, overgeneralizing, making broad conclusions from limited experience, and mind reading, assuming others think negatively about you. So when we're dealing with clients, we need to sort of engage some tools. Now, hypnotherapy is really good at working with clients at that level. It's delving into that subconscious where their mind has those deep beliefs stored.
For sure, and I think this is where we come into our own. You know, we can use the CBT with the hypnotherapy because we can access rather the subconscious mind as well and really get in there deep.
For sure. So it helps challenge and reframe that cognitive distortion really well. I think Milton Erickson, if you think of the idea of Ericksonian language patterns, it's funny how when you think that things are going so bad, that's when you make your biggest breakthroughs. And those breakthroughs were worthwhile every time because you just get better and better from here, don't you? And so you can kind of add an ego strengthen in that wonderful hypnotic way. So, direct suggestion, embedded and deep structure, all of these things we can use to reframe that cognitive distortion into a better one. If you're going to bother believing something, let's make it shinier. By working with the subconscious, hypnotherapy reprograms that thought process really well. So just recapping on those things, what are your thoughts for that, Teresa?
Oh, definitely. Like we said earlier, where you where you focus attention, energy flows, and let's make it positive. Why not? So often we get into that negative, and we're really good at putting ourselves into a negative spiral. Let's flip it, make it positive. We're living life. Let's enjoy it. Make it positive. Make it fun.
Absolutely. So when we're looking at that reprogramming the cognitive distortions, we want to restructure those negative beliefs and really challenge those ideas. Reframing the emotional response also, this is a core part of a hypnotherapist's toolkit. If you don't do that, it's not going to work. We need to recreate or reinforce a new outcome to that trigger response. So every time they go into, let's say it's fear of flying, every time they go on a plane, from now on, they are feeling calm, relaxed, in control, and enjoy the entire flight from beginning to end. And even beforehand, they're looking forward to it. So you want that response to be very, very different. And that's a core part of what we do as hypnotherapists. What are your thoughts there?
Oh, for sure. And if you don't do that, then you are not going to get always very good at positive outcomes. There are certain parts in hypnotherapy that are just a must that need to be embedded into your session.
So positive affirmations, there's something about the power of words. Words have power, and that positive way of framing something rather than you're not going to feel distressed. You're going to feel emotionally resourceful and calm and confident. So we want to make sure that if we do notice the negative and we say that in our hypnotic journey with someone, we're also finishing with the high note. It's really important that you're showing the brain what it's going to do now.
And I think people forget this in everyday language, and it's something that perhaps you can try and be thoughtful about the words that you actually use. Like often we say to our children, don't forget to bring your homework home, or don't forget your PE kit. Whereas our brain thinks about it and thinks forget, and they don't bring it home. But if you say to them, please remember to bring home your PE kit, you think, remember, now what was it I had to remember? And then that triggers that thought and the memory, and you quite often will bring that home because you're remembering it. So the words do have power of how we behave.
Absolutely. When we kind of look at that idea of, I guess, working with different clients, obviously each client has their own reason for turning up, and investigating and taking a bit of time and energy to look at, the restructuring, the reframing, and the positive affirmations. These are core things that a hypnotherapist does. Yeah. Okay, so when we're kind of looking at the idea of practical techniques for clients, so self-observation, noticing the negative thoughts when they arise, I often tell my clients, get excited when you notice it, because then right there you have choice. You can choose to change it. If you don't notice it, you don't have the choice, right? So get excited when you start to notice an observation of a negative moment, where you, in that moment, because you now notice it, you can exercise choice. Challenging the beliefs, actively questioning the truth of sabotaging thoughts. It may seem like you're going to slip out of rapport, but actually this is the big breakthroughs that often when you ask open-ended questions in the right way, the person will self-actualize. They'll start to join the dots. This is a very powerful part of good therapy. What are your thoughts there, Teresa?
For sure. And I know so many people that don't like to sort of dig into this area because they feel they're being intrusive or going to break that rapport. But I think it's really important that you believe in yourself and you believe in what you've been trained in, and you do challenge beliefs.
Quite often I'll task a client to go away and say, is it true or false? How do I know that to be true? So that's one of the exercises. They might go away and really start to explore. So when they're triggered with something very strong and emotional and they're about to kind of pivot into reaction, that's an opportunity for them to say, hey, is this fact or fiction, or is it mind-made? Have I conjured this up because I'm worried about this?
Another one I ask people is, like, when they think about it, is that my thought? Is that my belief? When did I first find it or think it and feel it? Okay, so that was when I was a child. Do I still feel the same way now? Probably not. And looking into those sort of ways as well.
For sure. So positive visualizations, so hypnosis helps a client visualize success. Now, again, there will be some clients that don't know how to do positive visualization, right? But you can still work with them. You can go, I want you to imagine the emotion of that new response. I want you to imagine it whatever way you'd like to, whatever way that makes sense to you. Run a dress rehearsal in your mind about how you're going to react in that way. But the person may not be visualizing how they're reacting. They just might be imagining how they're going to talk themselves through the moment and how that's going to feel. Another person might just core into the feelings of the moment and how that's going to change in a good way. So everyone is a bit different in the way of how they do their dress rehearsal. What are your thoughts on that one?
For sure. And again, we don't know what our client's going to feel. So although we want to tailor the session to them, unless we actually know that they can't visualize, then be mindful of your words and how you present that to your client, and listen to the feedback that they give to you.
Absolutely. Right. So when we're kind of looking at moving forward, the idea of these three things, so self-observation, noticing that negative thought when it arises, the challenging of the beliefs and actively questioning the truth of the sabotaging thoughts, and positive visualization, that hypnosis, the self-hypnosis is a big part. It's not just what you're doing in the session one-on-one, but it's what they're doing after the session that also counts. And if that means that you've done a nice recording that they can listen to again and it can help them reinforce things, I absolutely am a great advocate for that.
And like you're saying, along with this tool, they can actually notice those negative behaviors or thoughts and then choose. They've got choice then of how they behave.
Yeah.
That can be homework.
Absolutely. The empowering the mind is a key part of what a hypnotherapist does, and that mind can be reprogrammed to work for you instead of against you. Just as it's programmed to work against you, it can be the opposite. And that, I think, gives a bit of hope to someone. And I might even say, look, as terrified as you are, that's as absolutely positive and euphoric as you can feel. You can feel the opposite. And that's a nice way to a nice idea to embed in a session with a client, I believe.
Yeah, for sure.
So just thinking about hypnotherapy as a powerful tool to transform those cognitive distortions. You have the power to shape and reshape your thoughts and unlock your potential. When we're looking at these ideas, a lot of times people have never tried hypnotherapy and they're maybe just trying normal talk therapy, and they haven't quite got there yet. They've just been talking about the issue rather than solution. And I think that's the big difference between us working and other people working, that we have a lot of neat tools in our toolkit.
We sure do, and there are many forms, and we don't have one session that fits all. We can pull different tools from our toolkit out for the individual clients. It's just I think it's an amazing profession to be in, if you like helping others.
Now, if you've enjoyed this talk time today, we have more coming, so tune in for another episode for next week. I'm really excited because we're doing a series of different things around psychology and how it sort of kind of connects with what we do as hypnotherapists, so psychological theories and understandings. So I hope you've really enjoyed today. We also have an exciting news. There will be a client that I've been working with that you will get to see a real client session after this particular series. So if you're interested in seeing what a session really looks like, we've had a volunteer who stepped up and we started filming. So I'm looking forward to rolling that out later so you can see how that goes. Now, we have a school, so if you want to train as a clinical hypnotherapist, check out the NZACH school. You can find out more on the website about how that is. Doesn't matter where you are in the world, we can do it online. You get to have live tutorials as well as lots of wonderful information in the back end, so you can read and do things in your own time. So we are here to support you in that. So if you are keen, check out the website www.nzach.ac.nz. And Teresa, any final thoughts?
There is, and on that note, please like, share and subscribe. You may not be interested in pursuing the hypnotherapy career, but you might know others or yourself maybe, and you may have friends or family that also want to. So please do hit the like button, share and subscribe for each week of updates.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Teresa, for being here, and so we can chit-chat together and share our knowledge. And thank you to everyone out there for tuning in. I really appreciate it, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.